the streets and houses, rainbow climbing high. Everyone can see it smiling over the sky. Paint the whole world with a rainbow.
When I was growing up, and a lot of them had puppets in them, so why would you think that is?
I think really it probably, we're talking about the 70s, aren't we, really, sort of thing, aren't we, or the 80s, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I mean, at that time, well, for a start, we had, there was Sesame Street was programmed over here on when Channel 4 started. It decided that it would, show a really great, and that had, of course, loads of puppets and the Muppets and everything. And the independent companies, after talking to educationalists and all that sort of stuff, said, it's too Americanized, the spellings are all wrong and some of the pronunciations are not right. You should make your own programs. So basically, companies like Thames and Yorkshire and ATV all, got their heads together and got into the sort of preschool sort of stage and decided to make their own programs. And one of the early ones was Rainbow, funny enough. I don't know whether it was the first one, but it was one of the first ones. And then Pipkins, I think, started on ATV. And then there was... so various companies decided to do their own shows. And I think that's probably why. I mean, there was always puppets on television right from the very start. I mean, even in my childhood, there was Sooty, there was Muffin the Mule, there was, Jerry Anderson started in the sort of late 50s, I think, with things like Twizzle and all those sort of things. So there was always sort of puppets. I mean, the very first image, if you like, that appeared on, British television was a dummy's a head. I can't remember who's called now, the name of it, but, it was a ventriloquist dummy, and that was John Logie Baird's very first image was a sort of, you can call it a puppet if you like, but a dummy's head,
Yeah, that's right, it's true, yeah.
But that was the very first image. So, in a way, it's in our psyche, really. And I suppose we always liked, as kids, having, teddy bears to talk to or something. And we liked smaller things and the fact that puppets are. And, I think that sort of helps, a child sort of. And certainly now, when I've been doing Rainbow for so long, and people ring me or talk to me and say, am I going to shoot in Rainbow? That was my childhood. So they talk about it as their childhood. So obviously the characters and the image in their mind, it's very strong. Sorry, that answer your question a little bit, sorry.
Yes, it does, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Did any part of you want to be an actor to begin with, or did you automatically...
Well, funny enough, right from as a child, I did actually have some puppets. I didn't have very many. I come from a sort of council flat in South London, and so there wasn't loads of money, but we did have long summer holidays, and in the summer holidays, my sister and I got together and put on sort of shows, as it were. Now, these were very amateur and very bad, probably, but the local kids, in the flats, because we all had a lot of time to spare in the summer holidays, would come along and just sit and watch them. Can you believe I had a wind-up gramophone, dreadful old records and stuff, and I had about 3, they were called Pelham puppets. They were marionettes, what you could buy in the shops, and they were fairly, expensive, but I managed to get hold of some. Anyway, and I did those sort of shows. I think I had a few glove puppets as well. And so I was sort of doing puppets, as I say, in a sort of dance, sort of amateur way, but, I managed to get reactions from kids, in the flats. But then, while I was at senior school, which I didn't stay for very long, to be honest, a friend of mine, my only friend who was interested in sort of acting, if you like, or drama or theatre or anything like that, got an audition for the musical Oliver, which was way back, I'm talking about 1961, I think, that sort of time. We were still at school. Anyway, he said, well, come along with me, sort of thing. So I went along with him, but we sort of, I can't remember, it was in a school with some sort of hall away, and there was loads and loads of kids, I think they put an advert, I think, in the Daily Mirror or something, wanted workhouse boys for new musical sort of thing. Anyway, went along and he sang, and he got it because I wasn't tall, but I think he was about just over 4 foot something, can't remember, but and I was about 4'8" or something, just too tall. They wanted small, really small boys, and I didn't get it, and I was terribly disappointed. But very sweetly, he invited me to go sit in the gods. This was it in Leicester Square, because he got the part, just one of the boys, not the main Oliver part. But anyway, still wonderful. And I sat up in the gods and watched them sing and saw it a few times. I think he managed to get me a free ticket, which was amazing. Anyway, and after that, I thought, well, he's managed to do that. The drama club at school was really, they were for bigger lads, and I was this puny little kid, really, and they thought, oh, I don't really want him in it. And so I thought, well, I can do any sort of character if I do puppets. So I thought, well, I could be a lion, nobody would know, they wouldn't look at me as walking about this skin or anything there. I could have a sort of lion puppet, I could have a little mouse puppet, so I could have, all different size type puppets, and nobody would know as long as I just changed my voice a little bit. And so puppets sort of took over, and then I did find that there was an organisation called the British Puppet and Model Theatre Guild, and from there I went along, because it was actually in Vauxhall. I was living in Stockwell, the flats were, so it wasn't that far away, and so I got a bus down there, and I met up with fellow enthusiasts. Basically, they were husband and wife teams really were doing puppets and stuff, and of course they had wonderful marionettes, ones I'd never seen before, worked much better. They had all sorts of different puppets, and eventually I met a younger puppeteer. There wasn't that many young people. There was somebody a bit young, a bit older than me, but not as not so old. I mean, they were probably in their 30s and 40s, but for a sort of 15-year-old, 14-year-old, I thought they were quite old, really. Anyway, I met this younger guy, and his name was John Blundell, and he was a guy that, which I eventually discovered later, was made the puppets, for instance, for Thunderbirds. He designed Parker, the puppet, for Thunderbirds, and he also, but at the time he was making puppets for Jerry Anderson. And of course, I've been watching all these Jerry Anderson shows, the sort of Torches, and then he went on to Supercar, which I thought was rather fun. And then eventually Fireball XL5, which he'd been making puppets for and was working on. And of course, I was terribly excited to meet a guy that, and he gave me a photograph of the Fireball XL5 puppets, which I took to school and showed off. Look what I've got, the old vile child that I was. But anyway, that in a way, sort of made me think, well, I want a career in puppets. I didn't know how I was going to do it, still at school, but I also was taken by him to what they call the Educational Puppetry Association, and sadly it's now defunct, but it turned into much later on in the sort of 70s, a place called the Puppet Centre in Battersea, where the Battersea Arts Centre was. Anyway, getting back to the EPA, I met a wonderful puppeteer called A.R. Philpott, but known in the puppetry world as Panto Puck. He did glove puppet shows, and he was probably in his 60s by then, but a wonderful sort of guru of puppet, and he just thought, oh, I've got a talent, and let me play with his puppets and his stage and stuff. And I thought, my goodness, fantastic. And his wife was a lady called Violet, and she made me a couple of puppets, and I started to actually, because I was never really a maker. I always thought making puppets wasn't my forte, but and I thought, well, I can charm my way in getting people to help me make them. So we did it sort of together, actually, but I mean, they did the most of the work. And I produced a stage and did actual shows for children's parties, can you believe? Aged about 16, but before that, I'd written off to Bob Pelham, who was the man who made all these Pelham puppets and had a factory in Marlborough, Wiltshire. Anyway, he wrote back and said, there's a puppet theatre called the Little Angel Theatre. You might be interested in going. They might be able to offer you a job, because I'd written, they had started to write. I wrote to the BBC, and they said, no, we do have a BBC puppet theatre, but I think you ought to go to art school first. We don't have any vacancies, blah, blah. Slightly, a bit sad, really, but I was a bit put off by that. But then Bob Pelham, when he gave me this address with the theatre, I then went to the puppet guild, and they said, oh, yes, it's just open, this puppet theatre. Yes, we're all going to go to a visit, but sadly there wasn't room for me on the coach. But an Australian puppeteer called Edith Murray, she was visiting the country, said, look, I'll take you. I know John Wright. We can introduce you, and you can see the show. Well, that totally inspired me. And to make a long story story short, I left school at 15. Can you believe you can still do that at those staple exams? And joined the Little Angel Theatre, can you believe, after writing a letter to him, John Wright, and I was their second apprentice, and I worked there for 6 months with no pay, and then I got £2 a week. Now I'm talking about 1963, 64, that sort of time. So, the pound was worth a little bit more money, and my parents were my father was a teacher, and my mother was, sort of not, I would say we weren't earning megabucks, but they sort of supported me with fares from Stockport to the Angel and all the rest of it. And really, I had my eyes really sort of widened because of being in the theatre. They had the most wonderful marionettes as the string puppets. They also did glove puppets and shadow puppets and all the sort of types, because they involved all the different types in the shows they were producing. And at that time, they were producing a repertoire. There was a repertoire of string puppet shows, but obviously they wanted to get new work because there's the building, they could use it. And that's what we did, and I'm still, believe it or not, I'm still involved in the Little Angel now after all these years, over 50 years. It's extraordinary. I'm now what they call an honorary associate, along with Lindy Wright, who was the founder director's wife, and I'm on the board of directors too now, and I'm going to be doing their Christmas show. So it's been an amazing time, really. So that's my start of puppetry, really, was starting at the Puppet Guild, going to the EPA, going to the Little Angel, and I think because it was a building-based place, puppeteers would go to visit it because, they a puppet theatre, must go and visit it. And so I got introduced to lots of different puppeteers who I probably wouldn't have met otherwise, and so my career took off, really. I was there for 8 months and then I went on to work with a puppeteer called Jan Bussell, who was famous for the Hogarth puppets, and he was the puppeteer who started the Muffin the Mule, who was the very first television puppet icon, known as said, started in 1946. Obviously, I wasn't around at that time, but I did work for him in the 60s, which was wonderful, and I continue to this day being part of, I know the grandchildren now, they've sadly died, the puppeteers, that started the Muffin Company, but the grandchildren, when I say grandchildren, they're parents now with their own children, but I borrow muffins sometimes. I've worked muffins since, for various events for them and stuff like that. So it's amazing, really. And then when I got the television job, which I'll tell you about for Rainbow, was basically I've been working in the theatre, and one of the people that was working in the Little Angel Theatre was a guy called John Thurtle, and he basically got the job, funny enough, on Rainbow as a puppeteer, because the original puppeteer, who was the lady that I'd met at EPA, Violet Philpott, she'd taken on the job to do, fun enough, it was just Zippy then, the very first series, and second series I think she did, and she sadly sort of did her back in, one of her discs went or so, partly because, when you're puppeteers, you suddenly got this amazing job, and I think she was probably earning about £100 a week or something. Well, that was a fortune in those days as far as puppeteers concerned. You would never earn mega bucks when you're puppeteers, but suddenly, with a television job, that was really good. Anyway, and she felt she couldn't not, stay on doing it because it was going to help her establish her own company. She always wanted a company, and the money was helping, towards that. Anyway, poor thing, she did do her back in, and she had to retire from the show, and John Thurtle took over, who was one of the puppeteers, and then he retired after a bit because he was setting up with a partner a show called Playboard for the BBC. He was a brilliant puppeteer. Sadly, he's no longer with us, and he basically was a wonderful maker and very intelligent, very brilliant guy, and made puppets for Playboard. Then ended up with his partner making a series called Button Moon, which you've probably heard of.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
He did that. Well, he went on to do that and couldn't carry on doing the Rainbow, although it was for Thames Television. So he phoned me up, being a friend, said, "Look, Ronnie, how about you taking over, Zippy?" Well, it was amazing because just at the beginning of Rainbow, or before it started, a producer and a researcher came to visit the Little Angel Theatre. I suppose they thought, all puppets, they get some ideas if they go to a puppet theatre. And at the time, and I always think this is a bit of a coincidence, I was having some puppets made for a children's show that I was going to do for their Saturday morning shows. And one of the puppets had a great big zip across his mouth. Didn't look like Zippy, but had this zip. And I still got it. It's sort of like a brown potato shaped thing. Anyway, and I thought it was a good idea. This puppet would talk too much and they'd zip him up. Believe it or not. Now, I don't know. I haven't got any real sort of facts. I was never told this was the case, but the researcher and the producer came to talk to John Wright, and John Wright said, "So I'm terribly sorry, it's not the sort of job that I would undertake." But they were wandering around looking at stuff in the workshop, and I'm sure the researcher saw this puppet with the zip across, and believe it or not, in 1972, whenever it was, there was Rainbow and was a puppet with a zip across his mouth. I didn't name it, obviously, but and I thought, what a coincidence. And then suddenly, the coincidence even more, the fact that I was able to take over from John and stayed with the programme for, 20-odd years, it was on. So, anyway, that's just a byline to the story, but I would like to think, well, maybe, they saw that. Maybe I was sort of, I don't know what the word is, but maybe it was, it was fate. I should be doing that puppet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the story of that. And I carried on with Rainbow, as I say, right to its finish. I mean, we did the Thames programmes, and I think I started around about 1973 in October. So the programme had been on for a year, and they'd had various changes. I mean, the original Zippy looked a little bit different. John Thurtle, being a brilliant maker, redesigned Zippy, and he's the puppet that everyone sees now. It looks lovely. And he also made the George character, because originally George wasn't in the original series. They thought it would be nice to have a foil for him, and because he was the perfect foil. And they got a new voice man. I didn't actually do the voice of Zippy at the beginning. A man called Roy Skelton did the voices, and he did them, for many years actually. But then I took over when, for instance, we sometimes opened fates or did sort of charity things. And Roy lived in Brighton, and he had a family and everything, and he found it difficult always to go up to voice the puppets, behind a wall or something, because they were pretty sort of, if it was a fate, you just had to sort of hide behind something. And anyway, and it was easier for Jeffrey and the singers to be there because they're just there as actors, and that was fine. And with the puppets, it was always more tricky. Anyway, I took over doing the voices certainly for Zippy, and so I did some of the live events, and so I sort of was taking them, just copying Roy's voice really, and sadly a few years ago Roy died, and I was asked by Fremantle Television, who sort of owned the brand, as it were, to take over and do Zippy in various appearances, and I'm still doing, can you believe, appearances with Zippy now. Just last year I did a programme for Channel 4 called The Last Leg, which was a wonderful programme, sort of political comedy satire, but updates, but it's live as well. And I think what I did was they asked if Zippy could appear because one of the presenters said they have live tweets and things that come out, and they read them while the show's on and everything. And one of the people said, "Oh, you sound like Zippy from Rainbow." And the guy said, "No, I don't, blah, blah, blah." Anyway, they thought it would be a funny idea to surprise everybody by Zippy popping up the next week. So that's what happened. So I popped up, and of course they loved it, and the audience went mad. And then I did a sort of skit where I pretended to be him as Zippy and introduced a few things, and he wasn't in the studio, and then of course he walks in and says, "What's going on?" And it was fun. It really was. It was lovely. But I've done quite a few things. I've done Children in Need. Anyway, it's gone for the moment. But anyway, various things, and we still, I still get asked to do stuff. I did a thing for a charity thing just 2 weeks ago now in Margate. It was Zippy and George appeared. Then it was a charity that is brilliant, actually. It was for young persons, cancer charity, and they were the people that were sort of running it were ran. they got drivers to get old, not bashed up cars, but cars that can still run, and they did sort of rally round Europe, and they were making money for this children's charity, which, cancer charity. And they just thought Zippy and George would be great to sort of, just appear and open it and say, what wonderful jobs you're all doing, type thing. And so that's something I do. Fremantle Television or Fremantle Media own the brand, and every now and again they ring up and say, can you do this, can you do that? So it's still carrying on, even though it's off the television, and I think it must be nearly 10 years it's not been on. But of course there's DVDs, they make masses of merchandise now still, and it's still sold, so they're quite happy. Sadly, it's not something that I get any money from. That's fair enough. I'm just an employee, as it were. But it's been an amazing ride, really, journey, really, through the years.
When you work on Rainbow, when you copy the lines...
Yes, what happens is, I'll give you a breakdown of when we were doing the programmes. Basically, we'd start the week on a Friday morning or afternoon, depending on when, and it would be what we call a read-through, and we'd record 3 programmes a week, so we'd get 3 new scripts. Then the writer who wrote masses of scripts for us in the early days was a man called John Kershaw, and I think he wrote over 1,000 scripts, Anyway, and we'd read through with the producer and the director of the programme and the cast, and we'd just read the scripts through, and Roy would read. We'd sit and listen to the things we weren't voicing then, and then the production manager, well, not the manager, she was the PA, and she would time the read-through to make sure that the scripts were at the right time. And I think originally the programmes were just under 20 minutes, so they had to be sort of, obviously with independent companies, they've got to be absolutely to the time, so that they can get their commercials in and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that was done, and then then they'd go away, the producer and the PA, leaving us with the director, and we'd sort of, what we call block it, we'd block the moves. We'd have 2 chairs to represent where the window was, then we'd have a table, and we'd put 2 chairs behind. We didn't have any monitors to see what our puppets looked like, we just had to sort of be there and they'd sort of read through and say, well, this is where I want you to stand, Jeffrey, to do this bit, and Bungle, you're going to stand over there, and you'll come through the door there, blah, blah, blah. We didn't have a mock-up of the set, we just had tape on the floor, just like an actors do in a rehearsal room. They don't always have the fully thing until they get into the theatre, and it's similar to the theatre. We then did, on Friday afternoon, when we finished that, we'd go on, say, maybe till lunchtime, and then we'd all go home, and we'd all supposedly learn our lines. Well, basically, I did used to learn them a little bit so that I would know when Roy was going to speak, because I was stuck under a table or behind the window or whatever. But what I found was that I got to a stage where I didn't actually need to learn the lines. I would know when Roy would take a breath almost. He was sitting in the studio, we called it Roy's Hole, it was quite funny, and he had a sort of soundboard around him, and he had a monitor so he could see the show, the puppets. He could also look above the board and see the live action if he wanted, but cameras would be in the way a bit, so he'd got a monitor, and he'd obviously had the script marked out, George Zippy, and so he would obviously do the 2 voices, which was amazing. He sort of, oh, hello, like, hey, George, do that sort of stuff. And basically, we would then, after the weekend, we'd go back on the Monday to the rehearsal room. It was Teddington Yacht Club, and it sounds very grand, it wasn't really. And, basically, we'd go through the moves again, without the scripts this time, because obviously the actors would have learned their lines, apart from Roy, who was reading and stuff like that. And, maybe over the weekend, Jeffrey might have made a few changes to the script just to make it easier for him. Same with Bungle or whatever. And same with Roy. Roy might say, actually, I don't think Zippy would say that. He might say this. Could we try that line? And that sort of thing. And then we'd go through it, say 2 or 3 times, and then we go back home again. Then on the Tuesday, the producer and the PA would come in, and we would present the 3 programmes to them, sort of lines learned, moves learned, and they would time them. And if, for instance, we'd extended the timing a bit, we'd have to do some cuts. So they would I'd have breakfast in the studios because there were lots of programs going on and they had a canteen. And then we'd start, I think we'd started between 8:30 and 9:15. And that would be a camera rehearsal in Studio 3, which was the smallest studio in Teddington. Studio sadly no longer there now. It's all been knocked down and they're making luxury flats, all rather sad. But anyway, so we were in Studio 3 and we do a camera rehearsal in the morning, all 3 programs, so that the director could then, point the cameras and make sure that her camera script was working properly and we were happy with what we could see. And also it was the first time for us because as puppeteers, we're hidden under the table, so the only way we can see we have a monitor, little television screen under the table, and we'd watch that, and we'd watch the puppets and their reactions, and the whole we'd see the same pictures as the directors would see, so all the cuts, we'd see, and so that we could get the puppets looking in the right direction, because obviously, if we got them looking a bit odd, they wouldn't look good at all. They wouldn't look alive, as it were. And Roy had the same thing. He could look at the monitor and see how the whole thing was shaping. And that's what we did for us. And that was, in a way, that was our best rehearsals as far as we were concerned, because we were under the right table, that we were sitting in the right sort of low chairs that hid our heads from showing. And if we were behind the window, same thing, we could see. And so that's the sort of rundown. And we did 2 programs on Wednesday, quite a busy day. We'd finish, I think I wasn't home usually till about 8:30 at night because I lived in Islington by then. And so it's quite a jog to travel from Twickenham to Islington. And we didn't finish till usually, I think, around 7, something like that. But there was always, if I was driving, there was a lot of traffic, the West Way coming across Islington. It was always quite busy. Anyway, so that was the Wednesday. And then the Thursday, we just did the 1 program. But if we needed to do any, for instance, if the songs, the musicians always wrote songs for every program, different songs for every program, amazing really. And sometimes their numbers were quite complicated. So if it was a complicated number, we might do 2 songs on that day so that they could, have more time to get that worked out properly. But otherwise, we'd put the songs, we'd do them in order of the scripts, as it were. We wouldn't do, sometimes we do a song first and get rid of the set so we could have the set for us. It all depends on how complicated the programs were. But that was something the director worked out with all the camera guys and, the props people and the scenes people. And that's really how we did it. We did that for many years. We did it all the years, at least, say, 15 years. I think the last few years we did some episodes at Euston Studios because it was, I don't know why they changed it at Euston. I think it gave the Euston camera crews a bit of a chance just because they used to do sort of news programs at Euston. And I suppose they were literally just pointing their cameras at sort of people behind a desk. Well, this time they were, did a bit more action and they enjoyed it. And the programs it got more and more fun in a way. I mean, originally they were fairly educational, but I mean, we always had the educational element in the program, but we got a bit more fun. Programs about, Zipman and Robin and, taking the Mickey out of Batman and Robin and all. Had the characters going off to space and, all sorts of wonderful things. And again, as I say, that's the sort of rundown. Originally we did about 26 weeks a year of Rainbow, so it was actually more and more companies took over. I mean, I think there was Pipkins and one for ABC. I think that was the sort of Manchester area or whatever. They did, I think it was ABC. I always get confused with different companies. But anyway, they started to produce them. The more and more programs that they, the more shows they did of preschool, our time on screen was cut because everybody had to have a share of, the program time, the airing, as it were. So, and eventually we ended up probably only doing about the very end of the thing, about 6 to 8 weeks a year. So, because all the other companies were having a go doing them as well. So and being, they had to share. We had to share the time, but we had. We were very lucky. We did over 1,000 programs. We also got an award. In those days, it was from BAFTA, but it wasn't like the BAFTA Children's Award they have now. I mean, it was a Children's Award, and it was from BAFTA, but they called it the Harlequin Award. And we can't remember the actual date, but anyway, we were given a photograph of it. It was Thames Television in their sort of cabinet of awards and BAFTAs and things for a while, and then or for the year, and then it was given back. But I think there was engraving Rainbow won it. I think things like Blue Peter had won it for many years, so quite a wonderful thing that we actually won it for the programme, which was quite nice.
Was it quite uncomfortable a lot of the time?
Some of the time, I mean, we were very lucky. The chairs that they made were like wheelies. We had little wheels under these, so we could sort of move around a little bit. But we as puppeteers, we find ways of trying to make it a bit more comfortable. For instance, there'd be shots when it was a close-up of Jeffrey, we could just relax our arms a little bit, and then because we'd know when the next shot would be because we'd done the camera rehearsal, so we sort of knew. So, and also, there's a classic times when Zippy was sort of putting his hand under his chin. I'm sure you've seen the programme.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be leaning the puppet and resting my arm a bit that way, even though I was in shot. And there was sort of moments that we could do that. Sometimes, long scenes, they were never really too long, which was, I think, good. But it wasn't too bad. I've done other puppet things on television where it's been much more achy and stuff. The sets were built maybe too short and we were standing and I'm having to sort of crouch to get my head out of shot when I'm walking a puppet along or something like that. Well, with Zippy, I used to put my head into the bottom part of his costume, not costume, but his body, so that you couldn't see my head appearing just over the top. It'd only be the hair you'd see or something, but that covered, and it didn't stop my eye line. The bottom of the puppet didn't, conceal my eyes, so I couldn't see the monitor. The table was probably the most uncomfortable. They built what they call a counter on the other side of the opposite side of the window. That was a bit higher, and that was quite nice. We could move around a little bit. But we also had a garden scene where sometimes, the wall was covering us, and sometimes we did, moved around a bit, trolley, it was a bit sort of funny, really, because we were on these low trolleys, and so we were sort of using our feet to go along. So it wasn't like a smooth thing. If we were standing, obviously we could move a bit easier, but that wasn't the case in those days. It wasn't really until they discovered when the Muppet Show started and all the puppeteers were standing, for them they got to get extra movement because they had a big studio and a lot more money to put on the programme. So it's a slightly different thing, but it was it was uncomfortable, but not most. It just depended on where we'd have to be. Sort of for anything too long, but the scenes were fairly short, so it wasn't too bad. Poor Violet, I think, when she did her back, I think it was that she was in a bad angle most of the time and didn't say anything about it, whereas we could say, oh, that's a little bit too much, we're going to have to shorten, cut there or something, we have a break, just to, if things did get a bit too, uncomfortable, but, and they, would understand that, and same with Bungle had to put, he had a head that came off, it was just, and so he'd get terribly hot wearing that skin, running around and doing stuff, so, there'd be breaks for him to have, a bit of air, as it were, and he also in the camera rehearsals, he didn't put the whole skin on. He just put the hat. I'm going to call it the hat, but the head on and the gloves. So because the head was quite wide, and to get two shots of camera, if he just played as an actor, they wouldn't get a wide enough two shot. When they came, he always put the head on but he didn't put the full costume on until the actual takes and stuff like that. So it would be quite funny to see just the sort of head of Bungle and gloves of Bungle and a sort of a shortish man underneath. But it still helped the cameras to get the shots right.
Things like the bungle suit and the actual puppets. How did you clean them? Because they must have got dirty.
Well, they were put into dry. They went to dry cleaners, but the puppets couldn't be, sadly. So we actually had quite several sets made eventually over the years, and I've got a set of them now, a 70s set that what happened was they used to, I think it was every two, we used to call them like school terms, but every second series that we did, Pamela Lonsdale, the original producer, say, the puppets are getting a little bit grubby, because, they would do, all the things they had to do. And then Zippy's made out of towel. morning, and any bit of dust, would get onto his costume. Anyway, and the paws, the mitts that we'd wear, from their arms, that would get dirty because you'd be picking up things, maybe a bit of paint on it or something, because we did all sorts of funny things, making stuff and chucking stuff and picking up stuff and holding real food. Sometimes that all got sticky and dreadful. But they would, the puppets couldn't really be dry cleaned, but the Bungle's costume could. Not the head, but that was always, that wasn't so bad really. But the costume would be dry cleaned. And he had what we called Bungle's tutu inside. Then make him really, because he wasn't actually very bad, the actor who was inside Bungle, but he wore this sort of, all I can say is like a tutu, or like a sort of gauzy thing it made him much fatter, gave him the sort of, the plumpness, as it were, in the skin, because if you just put the skin over it, would just hang very sort of straight and a bit boring, but this extra bit, so that was always dry cleaned, after every sort of Thursday it was taken, so it was fresh for him, so it wasn't too disgusting for him.
Do you think Zippy was misunderstood as a character?
Misunderstood? Oh, I think he was wildly by the kids, understood completely after they adored him, because he was, all the things they couldn't get away with, he got away with, things like being slightly selfish, being very know-all-y, and but basically being very demanding. Well, as a kid, you think, oh, I'd love to, you start that, and your parents say, no, you can't do, don't be horrible, and whereas, and if he got too much, of course, the lovely thing was he was zipped up, so all his vocal tirades, were sort of put away, and then he'd have to pat his mouth, and let me out, and then of course Jeffrey was being the sort of, I can say the father figure, but the parental figure would say, now look, if Zippy, you behave, and I'll unzip you, sort of thing, and that worked really well. And I think George again was the perfect foil. He was this sort of very, shy, sort of quiet person, and of course Zippy could dominate him. And although, fun enough, as the series went on, George got his comeuppance quite a lot actually over the years, a little bit. He'd find ways, or what happened was we had the script writers changed. We had several different script writers, and then we had the actual cast were offered to write scripts. So Jeffrey wrote some scripts. Freddie Marks, who's one of the singers, wrote some scripts. Roy wrote scripts, and Stanley Bates, who was Bungle for many years, wrote scripts. And so they knew the characters well. It's a bit like the Archers writing their own scripts on the radio. We all knew the characters so well by then. We'd, been doing it for so many years. And so they really got to grips, and they became really strong characters then. Roy would write something for George and make him a bit more, maybe a bit more, not bolshy, but a bit more sort of stronger, and get his own way suddenly, and Zippy would be shocked, and all that. So it was quite good, and I think again that developed the series. People got more and more, and they fell more and more in love with it. Really, I'm amazed. I didn't really know how much the series meant to people until we finished the series. Finished doing the programs, and we started doing what we call student union gigs. It took a bit of a process, but they started suddenly producing masses of rainbow, T-shirts, and sort of the DVDs came out, and mugs and purses and bags, gosh, you name it. And they're still producing them now. They're still making them now, bit or not. And when we did, we also did a sort of update. I think this is the start of the student union gigs. We did an update of the rainbow theme, and we all sang on this updated version, and that became, we were asked to go on Top of the Pops, can you believe? We went on Top of the Pops, we did this gig, and it was a time when what were they called, the Something Sisters, they were from Hungary,
Cheeky Girls.
You know what I mean, don't you? Anyway,
yeah.
They were on, we were on, and it was unbelievable, and here we were, suddenly guests on Top of the Pops. That was the beginning, and all the people, they went mad, and I think we came up to about 13 in the pop parade. This was just the sort of updated version of Rainbow. It's a rainbow, da da da. And anyway, from that, the music department at Fremantle said, look, you ought to go around, and promote it a bit. so we did, and they thought the best thing would be student union gigs. And so we went round for about 3 years after Rainbow finished. We all went round playing the student unions, and my goodness, well, we started off actually at the Hammersmith Ballet, which is no longer with us, but there was a group of kids or young adults who, it was called the school days or something, and everyone dressed up at school in their school uniform. Don't ask me why, but all like a rave, they'd all dance to pop music. Well, we went to the Hammersmith Ballet because it was their, I don't know, 5th or 6th or maybe longer birthday, and we were the surprise guests on it. Well, it was packed, and we appeared. Jeffrey and Bungle appeared out of a huge birthday cake, and all the kids went totally wild. When we did that sort of that gig, they got an agent who specialises in student union gigs and said, look, this has gone wild, the people love it. And he said, oh my goodness, it'd be fantastic. And so for about 3 years we went round, not every night, but maybe 3 days a week, to nearly all the universities all over England and Scotland. I mean, when we went to Scotland, they flew us out, local plane to Edinburgh and then flew us to Glasgow. I mean, it was extraordinary. And that's when I suddenly discovered, they were packed. They loved us, and we did what we call Zippy and George's disco. And so we played all sorts of 70s and 80s disco tunes, and they were dancing around. I mean, we didn't usually start the gig till about midnight because they were quite well. Let's say they weren't drunk, but they were, well topped up with beer and whatever they were drinking, and they absolutely went mad. And we'd appear. We had a booth made, and we could just see through a gauze what the puppets looked like, and we had sort of lights, sort of dislighting on it, and we were on the stage and everything. And sometimes Jeffy was with us, sometimes Bungle was with us, sometimes all of us were together, sometimes it was just the puppets. It really depended on what the gig was, really. But anyway, we'd appear with our backs to the audience with the puppets, and then turn around, they'd just go mad. It was like, the only nearest I could tell was like being a pop star or something. They just cheered, and all their mobile phones were taking pictures, and they just loved it. And then we go in the dressing room afterwards. We were quite hot. I can tell you, I put earplugs on. The noise was amazing. But and then people queue up for orders and stuff like that. I mean, it was like, oh my goodness. So, and I think it's then I knew that the programs were popular because they kept making them. They wouldn't do it if they weren't popular. But I hadn't realised how much it become part of I'm going to say the nation's, young people's sort of
psyche.
I don't know what the word is, but it was in their psyche. They loved it, and we carried on doing that forever. And as I say, I'm still doing the odd Zippy and sometimes George appearance too. With the characters, it's just that they seem to they don't go away, which is really lovely.
So what was it like working on the show? I mean, did you all socialise and were you friends outside the show?
We did to a certain extent. We didn't do that much. Funny enough, it was a bit like going to school. We called it school term. In term time, we were so busy. I didn't always go back. By the time I was halfway through doing Rainbow, I got married, I got children, and I felt that I wanted to get back home, quickly, just to see the family, really. So I didn't stay in the bar afterwards. But some of the people who's nearer. I mean, Roy had family as well. J-Long, Freddie. I mean, the musicians did change over the years, but they were the ones that everyone remembers. They stayed around, and had a drink, had a drink sometimes with the director of the program and stuff. But I tended to go off home, so I didn't socialise that much. But when we did outside gigs, of course we did, a bit. And of course we always, after the break, we would say, well, what did you do in the break? And, we'd always have a chat in between rehearsals and stuff like that. So we remained all good friends. It's amazing, really. We had our disagreements. I don't think Zippy would say that. Oh, yes, he would, blah, 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 or something like that. Or, oh, Jeffrey, get that right, those make and do's if they all went wrong, come on. But they're all stuff to do with work. It wasn't on a personal level. We all got on really well. We still do. I mean, I don't see Jeffrey very often, or the singers, but we did have a meet-up a few years ago where there was the demise of the Thames Studios. There was about 400 people, actually, all camera operators, directors and people. We all went just to meet up and say goodbye to the studios because it'd been taken over by, bought up by some development company, and it was, and so there was a Facebook stage, and there's a big picture of all of us standing outside the studios. That was quite fun. And occasionally I see Jane at social events with Fred Dicks part there together now, and I did see Jeffrey at that point. He came to, and I hadn't seen him for ages, but we, every now and again, if we hear that a director has died, or sadly and when Roy died, I couldn't go to his funeral. I was working at the time, but everybody went along. And then when there was a producer that took over the program called Charles Warren, and he sadly died a few years ago. We all went to his funeral and, paid our respects. And that was, again, it's funny, you say you meet up people, you catch up at weddings and funerals, and certainly that does seem to be the case a bit now. But, if we bump into each other, we'd still, oh, no, darling, how are you? We'll be very friendly and very nice. But in a way, we don't sort of go off and have dinner together or anything like that nowadays. We all do other things now, sort of stuff. But,
so how did the film work come about?
Well, the film work came about really in the breaks between Rainbow. Jim Henson had done the film The Dark Crystal over at Elstree Studios, and I think it was Elstree. I hope I've got that right. Got that wrong. But anyway, he did it with Lou Grade, the big impresario, loved it and said, look, you've got to get the Muppet Show on as well. And the Muppet Show, I think it started before the Dark Crystal. Sorry, I beg your pardon, I got that wrong. And he put out once he'd done the Dark Crystal, he put out a thing of auditions for a new film called Labyrinth. So I thought, well, this would be great. And it was actually in the breaks in between Rainbow, so it was perfect timing. And I went along, I had a puppet made, a little beaver type puppet, and I did an improv with it. And sure enough, I got the job working it as an extra puppeteer in Labyrinth. And then from there, I think we were sort of put on a list of puppeteers, because Jim loved working in England. He thought the technicians were brilliant, and he just, they respected his work. And of course, his most popular shows like The Muppet Show was amazingly popular worldwide, and it still is really. And then, so he decided that he'd do a lot of his. He actually had a workshop in Camden Town where they made, puppets and stuff as well. So he has a house still in Hampstead. His family still spend time there when they come in London. He's kept this house, rather lovely house too. Anyway, so I got the job along with about, I think in the end, they originally only wanted 20 extra puppeteers, but I think they got 40, and we were in that film. And of course, it was my first major film I'd ever worked on, and it was like amazing. And of course, we just did goblin, various creatures and stuff like that, but it was wonderful to work on. And then from that, we went on, and I'll probably get all this wrong, but I think we did Little Shop of Horrors. That was Frank Oz who, auditioned us for that, and we were on that. So I did bits of the plant, the leaves, and the sort of tentacle things that were coming out. We did that, and that was wonderful to work on. That, in fact, that was an amazing film. I love that film. I just think it worked so well. And then we did Muppet Christmas Carol. We did Muppet Treasure Island. They just sort of carried on. All as extra puppeteers. We weren't the main core, of course, with the Americans doing the main characters, but we would help do an extra arm for a character, or we'd be other, not goblins, but other pirates, Treasure Islands. But it was wonderful. We did those in, I think, at Shepperton, not at Elstree. But, and Pinewood, we did Little Shop of Horrors in. So it was wonderful, and I never thought I'd be working on sort of major films, or films, per se. And it just sort of happened because we were, I suppose it's a cliche, but we were there at the right time, in the right place, sort of thing. And so we got the job. It's amazing.
I was going to ask you as well, I've seen a Rainbow episode that's sort of infamous,
Oh, yes, that's it. I know the one you mean. Well, that we made, can you believe, in 1976. And it was for the VTR people, the video recording people, who record everything up. They're upstairs somewhere. And they basically, when they record stuff, and sometimes recordings, and this can go for the BBC and ITV, obviously people make mistakes and they'll swear or something like that. Yeah. Oh, sorry, oh, shit, and then they cut that. Well, they sometimes keep these blooper tapes. I mean, programs have been made since, haven't they? About all bloopers and all the rest of it, or whatever you call it. And so what they used to do, they had a competition for what would be the best sort of, bloopers. And I think people got used to people swearing on newsreaders saying the wrong thing, and then they'd be cut, and then they'd re-record or film stuff. And so they said, well, what about Rainbow doing something? Well, of course, we were told by a producer, we're certainly not going to swear and carry on, but you can do a programme if you, and we all got together over one lunchtime. It was a Thursday because we had some time free because we actually recorded it in the studio, in the, same cameraman and all the rest of it. And we made this silly one, like Zippy going 1 skin, 2 skin, 3, and not quite saying 4 skin, but everybody knows what we're talking about. And then Jane playing with her knockers and Jeffrey playing with his balls. It was all that sort of schoolboy humour. And if you played it, I suppose, to I don't know nowadays, but certainly at the time, to a young person, they'd think it was just normal Rainbow. They wouldn't know, but of course, us adults, certainly knew what we were doing and how we kept a straight face doing that. But we did it as it was a Rainbow, and we all said goodbye at the end of it all, and then of course we all screamed with laughter.
One skin, 2 skin, 3 skin, 4. Zippy, where's Bungle? Oh, I think Jeffrey's trying to get him up. I can't get it in, Jeffrey. Well, you managed it last night, wasn't you? Yes, I know. Well, let's try the other way around. Oh, Jeffrey, have you got one? I've got it in. Hello, Bungle. Oh, hello. We're going to talk about playing today. Playing with each other, Jeffrey? Yes, Bungle. Tell me, have you got a special friend that you like to play with?
Jeffrey, yesterday we played with our balls, didn't we? Are we going to play with our friends' balls today?
Yes, and we can play with our twangers as well. Have you seen Bungle's twanger? Oh, I have, yes. I showed him how to pluck with it, yes. Yes, it's my plucking instrument. Can you pluck like Bungle? Yeah, I can. I'm the best plucker here. Let's get back to Bungle's twanger. Oh, Jeffrey, we could all paint our twangers, couldn't we? Well, not now, Bungle. It's nearly time for us all to go. Oh, that's a thing.
I know. Let's sing that plucking song again.
Oh, yes, and then Rod and Roger could get their instruments out. And Jane's got 2 lovely maracas. Oh, what a smashing idea. Jane, Rod, Roger. Hello. We could hear you all banging away. Banging can be fun.
Yes, and I was banging away all last night with Rod and Roger.
Yes, but it broke my plucking instrument. Oh, well, never mind, Roger. Look, we're all going to sing the plucking song. Come on, everybody, get your instruments out. Yeah. Do you want to blow my pipe while I'm twanging away?
Oh, no, Rod. I was blowing a lot with Roger last night. But would you like to play my maracas?
No, let's just pluck away with our twangers, yeah. Yes, it doesn't matter what size your twanger is. I've got a big red one.
I've only got a tiny twanger, but it works well. I like to play with it.
Well, have you got your twangers out? And remember, you can bounce your balls at the same time if you like. Or if you haven't got any balls, you can ask a friend if you can play with his. Right, come on, let's all sing the plucking song. Right, are we all ready? 1, 2, 3, pluck. Pluck, pluck, pluck away, we're going to pluck all day today. Pluck, pluck, pluck away, we're going to pluck all day. It's time for us all to go now, but don't forget to get your twangers out and play with your balls. See you soon. Bye. Bye.
And it went out, not out publicly, but it went, they did their competition, whatever. And we won it that year. It was hilarious. We won, we didn't win a prize or anything, but it was, we won the best not naughty, but, fun, silly thing, because it was like the programme, but it wasn't, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Of course, once YouTube started, in fact, it started when Channel 4 started, they did some late night, very late night, like 1 o'clock, 2 television, and somebody had got a copy of it, of the video or whatever they got hold of, and it was played on Channel 4 at one of these late night things, and that started people, thinking, oh my God, this is hilarious, all our rainbow characters being a bit naughty. And then, of course, when YouTube started, it was out, people put their copies of it, because they copied it from the telly program. They couldn't believe, this was their treasured, saying all these things. And then it was originally Fremantle Media, when it was on YouTube, was a bit shocked and said, oh no, we can't have it, and would get it taken off. But it was taken off and it was put back on as soon as it was taken off, and it's had, I don't know, loads of hits, everybody talks to me about that, what about the naughty rainbow? What did you do? And it's become very infamous, really, people know that. And there's been other, much ruder stuff, which I'm afraid when we did years ago with Jim Davidson and various that has been put on YouTube as well. Goodness knows, they were not supposed to be recorded, but there has been, stuff like that. But I think that's more difficult to find, thank goodness, because that is, Roy did swear. Again, it wasn't meant for public consumption or whatever. But nothing is sacred anymore nowadays. Somebody will find it and put it out on social media. So there you go. That's it. But it wouldn't be Rainbow if it didn't have a couple of naughty. Certainly that one, the one you mentioned, is the one that. But it was fun enough when people say, "Oh, it was Jane, Rod, and Freddie." It wasn't actually. It was Jane, Rod, and Roger. Roger Walker was the singer before Freddie joined, and Roger had to be in the 76 one we did. So, anyway, it's all very interesting, and that's the story of that, really.
Is there any job that you wanted to have and never got?
Do you know, I don't think there really is. The only thing I haven't done puppets in a circus. I've done nightclubs. I've done school disco type of thing. I think I'd never thought I'd do. I've done a musical. I was in Dr. Dolittle, the touring musical. I toured for 18 months, touring around doing. There were head puppets. The original one with Philip Schofield played Dr. Dolittle, and that was amazingly successful. That was wonderful to do. So I've always wanted to be in a musical ever since I was a kid. The sort of the not getting into Oliver. Going right back from the start. So I thought, when I've trod the boards, all these amazing theatres all over England, so that's been wonderful. I've been asked to do lots of lovely telly things. I've done masses of commercials and stuff. Zippy's did a few commercials. We did Love It or Hate It with Marmite. I've done with Zippy. No, after the series finished, but we did it, and no, that was wonderful. I've done Drench water ad with Brains from Thunderbird. I've done the Meerkats, puppeteer. I did, an ad with the Meerkats. They're stop motion, the characters, but we had some marionettes dancing. They were doing a puppet show, and it's just a short version of that. Oh gosh, what else have I done? I'm trying to remember. I should have my CV in front of me. There is a web page actually I've got that you can get some information from. It's still online. It's a bit old, out of date, but you'll get you things that I probably forgot to mention. Telly things and commercials and stuff. And it's just www.ronnieledrew pictures on there as well, which will give you some information, I'm sure. Like that, so it's all great fun. But no, it's a lovely profession to be involved in. It's partly because it's lovely to have had a character that people really love and be involved in, and people still think it's a laugh and fun and all the rest of it. And I'm writing, hopefully my biography was coming out next summer, where it should be. So hopefully that'll be good.
Well, thank you so much for spending your time to do
that's a pleasure, and thank you. It's been lovely.